Well, here we are at the end of harvest 2021, and we are on the 7th of September. The combine's just finished. We have been cutting on and off for 31 days this year, starting on the 19th of July when I did the first harvest log for this year in this same field. This is Aerodrome where the KWS Ami Star was being harvested. It's a little greener these days. We've got an oilseed rape and companion crop mix in here. Pretty desperate for a little bit of rain. Whether we're going to get some fairly soon this evening or not, I don't know. So harvest has been a bit of a challenge this year. We have had some very overcast and muggy, damp conditions. August itself was actually really dry in terms of rainfall amounts. We had 28 mil of rain. We would normally have somewhere in the region of 70 or 80. But we had a lot of overcast weather, a lot of drizzle, a lot of cool weather as well, which was really not a lot of help to the growing crops and also for the actual harvesting operation itself. And finally, when harvest is virtually finished, the sun comes out and we're back up to the sort of 28 to 30 degrees that we had at the start of harvest when we were cutting the barley off this field. So how did it turn out? What was it like at the end? Well, winter barley, we were growing some seed crops and some malting crops. All the malting crops have made the right nitrogen specification, they've made the right germination. We should be able to get the right moisture to get them taken in. So really pleased with that. The seed crops were on the whole not too bad. Probably the KWS Ami Star didn't quite yield as well as we'd hoped it would have done, and we need to have a bit of a think about why that was the case this year. But on the whole, and where prices are, that won't have been a bad crop to have grown at all this year. Overall, that's averaged about 7.2 tonnes a hectare. And our normal running average for winter barley would be of 7.5, so it's probably not too bad really. Oilseed rape, probably going to end up being the highest gross margin in terms of output that we will grow this year. That averaged 3.5 tonnes a hectare across the 130 hectares that we were growing. So where the rape prices are and the costs that we deployed and invested to actually grow the crop won't end up being a disaster. Far from it. That should end up being quite a good crop. We've actually continued to grow oilseed rape. These fields behind me here were drilled at the beginning of August to try and get away from the cabbage stem flea beetle, all for harvest 2022. And they could really do with some rain. This is sand over gravel, and yeah, it is just starting to suffer a little bit. But fingers crossed the weather is going to change and we should get a little bit of rain. I'm careful what I wish for based on the winter rainfall of 2020-21 and also into 1920 as well, which were two very wet winters. Casting our eyes back to the weather that these crops have had to grow in this year, you know, just behind that hedge at the bottom of the field we've got the Carrant Brook, and that was flooded at the beginning of October with 4 inches of rain. Some crops we'd just planted before that, others we planted afterwards. So they've had a bit of a challenge. We had over 25 days of frost in April when crops were just starting to try and grow in the spring. Very dry weather, very cold weather, which wasn't great for them. And then when we got into May, we had 5 inches of rain, 125 mil of rain. Again, just as crops were looking for sunshine and warmth, they didn't really get it. So I'm sure they've all have had an impact on the performance of these crops so far, which means I'm probably not too disappointed, if I'm honest, about how they've performed over this year. We've grown just over 4,100 tonnes of wheat. Really pleased. Most of that has done really well. We've got some sand over gravel land, some Insital that was pushing 10 tonnes a hectare. We've got some Crusoe that was sort of 8.5 to 9, but there were patches of headlands and wet areas that just got flooded out through the winter. So again, I'm probably not too disappointed with the way those yields have gone. Spring barley's been about average, 6.5 tonnes a hectare. It's all made full spec, so hopefully that will also create a reasonable margin, especially where the prices are at the moment. Some of that's contracted and forward sold, and some of it's still to be sold on the open market, so that should be a reasonable return from that crop again. And then I suppose one of the highlights really would be the winter beans. We haven't grown beans for probably 5 or 6 years. we gave up growing them because we couldn't get any consistent yield out of them, and the consistent yield of 1 is very, very good. This year they've averaged about 5.5 tonnes a hectare, some fields over 6, a lot of them sort of 4.5. So again, pretty pleased with the way those crops have yielded. Again, pretty cheap crop to grow in terms of inputs, so they should definitely be planted again this year, weather permitting. And we finished off just with a little bit of winter linseed, which was disappointing. It did just about a tonne a hectare. Fortunately, it was only 20 hectares worth, and we actually put that in as a comparison to have an alternative to oilseed rape, in case oilseed rape struggled in the future with the cabbage stem flea beetle, and we were actually forced to find an alternative. And if that is the alternative, then the alternative to that may well just be fallow, or a crop of vetch or something like that, or red clover maybe, to really boost soil fertility, soil health, rather than grow a crop that's going to be loss making. So we will be having another go at it this year. I think that April weather really didn't help the linseed at all, and so it probably deserves another chance to grow things on one year, or not grow things on the evidence of 1 year is pretty dangerous in farming. It's been a long, hard slog. The team have been absolutely fantastic here at Overbury, from Tim driving the combine, Gordon doing 90% of the grain carting, backed up by Sam from Hartbury, and Rob from next door, as and when we needed extra help with Rob. Mark back at the grain store, filling in with corn carting as and when required, but putting things safely into store, checking the moisture, looking after the dryer. We dried an awful lot of wheat and an awful lot of spring barley to be able to continue to harvest and get it all up and away. We needed to push on to enable to establish cover crops and oilseed rape and stubble turnips and things like that for the rest of the farming calendar. So really pleased about that. And Graham, not forgetting Graham, who was called up kind of out of retirement for a few days this year when things get pushed. So we wouldn't have been able to do it without the team actually sitting on the seat. So all credit goes to them for getting stuck in and making it all happen. And it does all happen, it all turns around again. This is oilseed rape, I say, planted for next year. Who knows, harvest log 2022, day 1, may well be coming from this very field. So thank you for all your comments, for your observations, for following the channel, and yeah, stay tuned. We've got lots of interesting things happening in the ground this year. Got a few interesting blogs and YouTube videos which I need to put together and tell you a little bit about what we're up to. So that's it really from Harvest 2021. Hopefully we'll be back in another 12 months time. That'll be here before we know it. Stay safe everybody, and stay tuned for more adventures next year.